I think that we must give credit to our Ghanaian negotiating partners. They have done extremely well.
Why do you say so?
First of all, the period over which such negotiations normally take place is much longer. We are seemingly having one of the shortest ones. Two, I think that on the whole, it seems the IMF has a lot of confidence in the ability to manage the system. And for me, it's quite unusual that the comments of IMF has generally been positive in favor of Ghana. And even now, they are prepared to go ahead and disburse the next tranche before these agreements are concluded. This is quite positive. The IMF has a dual role. They must do something to pressurize the bilaterals and then the bondholders. So it's in Twi, we say, they must say something to make sure that the people whom they are negotiating with will respond favorably, but also not make Ghana complacent. Because after all, it is our quote-unquote misdeeds or mismanagement that will have led to that. So, but I think that generally, I have confidence that we will pull through. And the Minister for Finance probably is well on track in terms of giving confidence, building upon his predecessor's work.
By end of next month, looking at the concerns expressed earlier, do you really think that we could have something by end of next month?
Most likely we will slip, but it will not be damaging to the cause. I mean, all throughout, dates have not been sacrosanct. The possibility that if the bilaterals don't come in, the IMF, though, has in principle agreed to release the tranche. Actually, if you follow the news yesterday, they are willing to release the tranche without an agreement with the bilaterals. So I think that we will pull through.
I want to read a bit of a quote from that press conference, which was organized by the finance minister. He said that we are working to narrow the gap, and that had to do with the commercial creditors. We are working to narrow the gap when it comes to what we initially proposed to the creditors. We have provided 33% discount, coupon rate of 5.0%, and we have 6.0 following that. And if you subject this to the threshold, you're supposed to achieve 55%. What's your understanding of this and whether or not this is even acceptable to the creditors?
Listen, no creditor will come and tell the debtor, get away with it. So therefore, they will hold on as much as possible and demand as much as possible. But also they have a risk that they have to bear. God forbid, if Ghana defaults, they have nothing. So their bond will become a junk and they will get nothing. I think that the IMF has agreed with the government that we must bring things down to 55% as sustainable. Give or take, at the end of the day, I expect that the bondholders will come very close to it. But it's natural that they will continue to hold out until they know that there is no other alternative. So in this negotiation, that is possible. And it's not only with the external creditors. You go to the bank and negotiate with them. They want to get every bit of things from you. But when they know that already they have given a loan, I serve on some banks' boards, and you find out that eventually you are going to the debtor and say, look, hey, bring me 60% and then just I'll forget all the rest, because other than that, you have a non-performing loan on your hand. So I expect that the creditors will come to a compromise and they will agree with Ghana with a win-win situation.
55%. Looking at our debt to GDP, the ratio, do you think that this is really feasible in that short time that the finance minister probably may be looking at?
Do you hear yesterday that America has given $66 billion to Ukraine just for arms? Mm-hmm. All our debt is how much? 30 billion. And we want to bring it down by 55%. All things are possible. I think that at this moment, it's a question of either side, more or less, what can I get with as much as possible, having my debt forgiven, the donors and the bondholders, how much we will make sure that, we can get from Ghana. We won't get them away with, murder. So it is an issue type of bargaining. But eventually, it's in the interest of everybody. In the bank, if somebody owns you and is not able to service his debt, the more you can get, the better for you, rather than total default.
One of the things that a lot of economists talk about is as you implement a lot of policies, one of which is now getting Ghanaians living abroad to pay tax if they have some sort of business doing here or spend some number of days here. And a lot of people say that these could be good, but until you cut down on your expenditure, you may not be able to achieve that overall thing that you're looking at. And that's why I asked the question of how feasible this 55% is and within which time frame, because really time is also of the essence.
It is the time frame they have already given. I'm expecting that actually all these hullabaloo will be concluded by the end of the year. And in terms of the taxes, the external ones, of course, in other countries' jurisdiction, all your income everywhere is taxed. But they shouldn't make too much of it, that within a short time, they are going to get so much from this source that will solve our problem. I don't really think so.
But you think it's a good initiative?
Yeah, it's an initiative. Actually, it's the norm that internationally, all your income from every source is either taxed. If you have a double taxation agreement, then when you pay here, you don't pay there. But the sum total of your income is taxable. And therefore, it is not unusual, except that in Ghana, we have gotten away with so much murder that now when we talk about normality, it becomes strange. If inflation was about 55%, we are now hovering about 25%, and the possibility that by the end of the year will be 15%. So in that sense, it is correct. But then the economy is still fragile. We are not collecting enough revenue. The expenditure has not been cut within a certain reasonable rate. So we have that problem that we have to countenance with. So we are not out of the doldrums. But our situation, which was very bad about a year and a half ago to a year ago, we have actually crossover.
Admittedly, we are not the same place as 2022, when the dollar was even almost 16. At a point, it got to 16 per cedi. But if I get what you're saying, yes, we are not at the very worst place.
Yes.
But don't get too excited about
you shouldn't
coming
be.
In because you're not out yet.
You know, the politicians, both government and the opposition, when they have started their campaign, sometimes I get worried because they are not talking to us how we are going to get out of all these doldrums. For example, you know that they are servicing the domestic debt, but the actual bonds are not being paid. We have just postponed it for 2 years or 2.5 years from now. And in that case, if none of them come up with a very feasible solution, how they are going to manage it, we could hit another snag and a serious challenge after 2026. So what I'm saying is that we shouldn't be complacent. We must have a sustainable solution, or else we will manage this year and next year, and then boom. So this should be, unless during that time we manage our expenditure, we increase our revenue, and especially our imports are brittled, because now everybody thinks that we are getting out there, people are promising there's going to be flat tax, which they mean is going to be lower taxation and the rest. No, if we are not very careful, within 2 years we will hit another storm. And that is what we should plan to avoid in addition to the current one.
But they've already been talking about long-term strategies. So what specifically were you expecting, or are you expecting them, the Vice President, who's the economist?
What term strategy have you heard?
Well, they are talking about the need for us to cut our debt. They are talking about even this GRA tax, the revenue mobilization thing that I talked to you about.
We have had a talk, and yet the rate of improvement of our GDP, tax per GDP, remains very low. And remember, we are going to have a higher debt servicing in 2 years' time to 4 years. And there's no one of them, neither government or opposition, for me, has come out with a clear strategy to that effect.
Specifically, are you able to give 1 or 2 things that you think if the government thought about and probably consulted stakeholders on, we will know that we are on the right path and this prediction you talk about?
Certain things must be done. For example, we know that government budget, about 95% are for wages and already committed expenditures, in other words, earmarked ones. Those ones cannot be increased much relatively over this period in order to bring expenditure down. Again, everybody is talking about what they will do, but during this period, we can't do much of public expenditure, rules, and other things. We must have a scheme to maintain the roads, because you cannot just leave, the rain will come. But you cannot do much development, big development in this period. And all these things are not, because it doesn't sound politically correct. Again, we must widen the tax base. Only about a little over 1/6 of Ghanaians who must be paying taxes do pay taxes, direct taxes. And so there are many serious ones. And then there should be a serious engagement, which is very difficult in the election year to do so, hopefully, maybe next year, because nobody would like to talk about taxation and how we must tighten our belts further before we start losing it. So there are hard decisions ahead of us. And both government and those who are looking for power must address themselves to them.
But you know, the public sector workers will not be happy with you with the suggestion that the government shouldn't increase expenditure when it comes to their wages, because they are saying the economy is hard, increase our salaries.
It's the question of, the chicken and the egg. The question is that the government can give you any money you want. We will get inflation, we will get our city's depreciation, the purchasing power will remain the same. What is needed is a planned one and some sort of agreement with the government. And I think that the trade union did some good thing, that in the past they agreed for a certain rate over about 3 years. At this moment, things must be put down. The government, the trade unions, the workers says that in the light of this, over the next 4 years, this is what we need to do. And people will understand it if they know that the alternative is that they are going to be worse off. Because if we hit another 2022, who is going to be the greatest sufferers? It will be the workers.
And speaking of workers, you recently made a comment saying that Ghanaian workers are
among the least productive.
They're least productive in their own country. The
Yes.
TEC thinks that you're wrong. The TEC thinks
Have they had anything to...
You lack an understanding of the system and the challenges the workers face.
Well, unfortunate for them, I have lived much of my life in Ghana. I'm a development economist and I know what I'm talking about. I was referring to a study which I did and addressed the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences. We must look at how we arrive at that. That is a fact. They know that a Togolese working in Ghana on the construction does better than a Ghanaian, and therefore the Ghanaian construction people are. But we know that if you go to, we are importing tomatoes and everything from everywhere else. Why? We have better conditions to do so. It's a fact. We are talking about 3% growth rate. It means that as a nation, we are producing at a very low rate, which is about only 0.5% or at most 1% above population growth.
So you're defending your statement?
No, it is a fact. And any one of them, we can sit down. We talk about education. Do you know, go to Togo, go to Ivory Coast. A 7-year-old, 2 years in school, is literate, can read and write. The Ghanaian, after 9 years in public school, is semi-illiterate. They can really, someone says, write your name, the name of your village. He had finished 9 years. The World Bank has documented it, that Ghanaian education I think 3 years ago, the World Development Report, is schooling without learning.
The TEC thinks that what you said is unwarranted?
No. That is the truth. Let them come. It is not attacking the TUC. It is unearthing a serious national problem. And to tackle it, there are several factors. Not only the workers, but in terms of the tools they work with, in terms of power, in terms of the equipment. But let me tell you, the workers, if we don't look at this very soon, Ghanaian employers will go on one hurdle. Instead of normally employing more people, they will be using more equipment, more AI, and there will be greater unemployment. As this is a national issue we must be looking at, not, of course, the trade unions leaders must say something to show that they are earning their income. But they know that as a nation, and as a nation I'm talking about, we are not producing. The average agriculturist, a farmer, yes, you can say he has constraints and other things, but the fact is that our productivity on agriculture is so low. And if we are going to be complacent, let us be there. And eventually it's the workers who are going to suffer. I believe that we are capable of producing at least twice what we are doing now. It's a question of how do we, government, workers, employers, come together to enhance our productivity, or else we will major in poverty.
In other words, what you're saying is that the workers led by the TUC should swallow the bitter pill and just make changes or help ensure that the system works.
And work with employers and government to improve our productivity, or else as a nation, we will be having a vicious cycle. My salary is low, don't pay me more, you pay me, there's inflation and other things. Can anybody tell me that the 25%, which was given the salary, 24 and then 20, has improved the workers' conditions? And I can tell you that the answer is no. Inflation is now running at 25%. So in real terms, it's zero. And is that what they are going to continue, so that the average Ghanaian's real welfare remains zero?
Get the Ghanaian worker to do.
The Ghanaian worker outside produces at the level of the people outside, but not at home. We have first an attitude problem, Abayan Juma. It's a very serious one. Other people were colonized. But I've worked in Africa. I started work first 9 months in Ethiopia. I was in South Africa as the head of the UN. I spent 4.5 years in Namibia just before I came here. I know the difference. Again, employers are crying. It seems that the average worker goes to the private sector and work only with the view of stealing anything they can steal. So there is therefore a watchman must have a watchman and another watchman, a security. I went. Yeah, I will come in. I went.
Private sector are stealing.
You ask everyone. Day, for example, I went to buy a product because I don't want you to trace it on the television, and I was shocked about the checks in which a simple product from the factory, there were about 5 checks, and at the entrance before there was, I would say, a non-Ghanaian, of course he may be a Ghanaian by naturalization, sitting there to check everything before you take it out. I nearly wept. Says, in my country, workers are almost looked at as, if you turn your eyes, they will steal. Well, other countries, you go straight away, you buy it, you go to the counter, and there's not the likelihood that something will get lost. Will not be up. So we must, if you go to the net, let me tell you, you will find some workers, employers who have left Ghana, and what they say about Ghanaian workers, I wouldn't like to repeat it because some of them are very uncharitable, and everybody can Google.
This takes me to another comment you made recently, which was referred to by the Roads Ministry to Iyoko. Iyoko has come up, you're laughing about it. Iyoko has come up to say that what you said about the fact that somebody has to pay 1 million cedis upfront before a contract is given is unsubstantiated and highly presumptuous, and that your comments were oversimplification of the tender procedures at the ministry, and therefore concluded that the matter is disposed of.
Why haven't they disposed of the statement by the minister who said that all his ministry is full of thieves? The minister who referred the case to them, said in August last year that of TV. Listen, judgment of the Ghanaian, and I can to judge and see that there's no corruption, not only in the Ministry of Transport, but in public contracting and works.
But Prof, that statement from Iyoko said that when interviewed during the process of investigation, you didn't have any evidence of a sort, and you just said it as a general. That's why you concluded that the statement that you seem to have said, "Oh, I didn't read evidence. I just said it."
It is not true. But I'm not going to discuss this in public. I'm sorry. I wouldn't go further. But Iyoko can make their statement. But what I told them is that they wanted the name of the contractor. And I said that you know, and I know, that what will happen to the contractor, not in terms of what he has said, but at the end of their business. If I and you believe that the roads would get washed after a year and 2 years, where other places last for 25, is because they have gone through clean one, I will leave it. I wouldn't like to engage in this further. I think that I'll rest my case.
So, Prof, but essentially,
I'll rest my case.
What you're saying is that Iyoko lied even in that statement that was issued.
No, I'm not saying he's lying, but what I'm saying is this. It is not the full story, my full story, that's all. I don't say they are lying. They say their investigation, they say it is presumptuous. It's up to them. Let them tell Ghanaians, they have told Ghanaians that it is presumptuous. Let Ghanaians make their judgment. I wouldn't go further.
But you're aware that even when the roads ministry responded to your statement, immediately after you...
The roads minister who said, here is an insider, who said that his ministry are full of thieves. You Ghanaians are not prepared to ask him to name the thieves in his ministry, but because there makes me appear, then you want to ask Stephen Adei. Let it be there. The road minister said that his ministry are full of thieves. And if a head of an institution says his ministry is full of thieves, and you want to have a discussion with Stephen Adei because he said that someone had told him that someone demanded a bribe from him. And therefore, that is the national issue. I'm sorry, it's a misplaced priority.
But that is the minister's statement. We are asking about what you said and what the Iyoko is saying.
No, because you are not after the truth. If you are after the truth as a journalist, a minister says that my ministry is full of thieves. Nobody, neither Iyoko or minister, will go and ask them. All that you are looking for is just looking for scapegoats and basically to find who that contractor is to be dealt with. I am not.
Shortly after the statement from the ministry, before Iyoko took over the case, there was a supposed group of contractors who came up to say that, well, the process is transparent and what the Prof is saying is not entirely the case, and we are also willing to support Iyoko investigate the matter.
Well, do you know that in Ghana, if they said otherwise, they will be arrested, because our law makes the bribe giver and the recipient both liable criminals. So we have a system. That's why let anybody decide to change the law and says that those who give bribes when they report will not be criminal, or without even changing the law, let the government decide to give amnesty to every bribe giver, and you see what will happen in this nation. But at this moment, we have a situation whereby the one who gave the bribe and the one who extorted the bribe, of them are criminals. I don't think that we will ever catch any thief in Ghana.
Briefly, what's your thoughts on what's happening at SNIT?
First of all, the government, the president has the right of appointment, for better, for worse, is constitutional. Second, Mr. Osafo-Maafo was one of the deputy director generals. So therefore, there were two of them, if I say. So they are at par. So either of them, I don't know the details, could have been appointed. I think that, therefore, it is up to the other one to have felt one way or the other that the appointment was either not right or not in his favor, and he cannot work under
the new boss.
Osafo Mafu. I personally think that it is one of the noble conditions that one must be able to say, for this reason. In 1985, I was a deputy director and head of research of Ghana Investment Promotion Center, then called Capital Investment Board. Things have happened, and I said that, look, I cannot work with this batch of directors and my boss. So I resigned at the age of 38. So I think that, but it's personal to him that he can, if he feels he cannot work under the new dispensation, he can resign. I think that sometimes the government can do something better. The way even the Director General was, giving a few days notice. You can be nasty, but not to that extent.
You think how it was done
was wrong?
Yes,
why would you say, unless somebody is doing something which, unless you act, it will lead to some sort of greater malfeasance or wrongdoing or covering up. But to go in the institution like SNIT and give a matter of days handover, in other words, the 3 months we won't allow you to stay there. It's normally, that's why, of course, they had to come to try to kill the fires that people think that there's something to hide.
So you think probably that could be fuel in the political interpretations of this very decision that has been taken?
Of course, if you act in a certain way, you open yourself, even if it is natural. And for example, I would have liked to know by now, why do you think that Mr. Osafo Mafu is the right person? The government doesn't owe anybody an explanation, but in such the circumstances, one would say that this is it. Maybe among them he was the first to be appointed, he's senior, and other things, and then you settle the matter. But they gave room for speculation.
Is it too late to do that now?
Well, I think that if you leave it for a longer time, even if it comes, it looks like a good up one. But still, there may be a room for such statement.
Prof, December 2024 general election. Do you think that the would have a third force for EC and NPP to stand alert?
There is a third force already. In fact, there are two coalitions, which I hope they will merge. But I think that Alan Martin and Abu Sakara. I must confess that young man, he's not too young, but I like his style generally. I must confess about that one. Have come up as a third force. The likelihood that they may win may not be that high. Why? Because in MPP and NDC, people have entrenched interests. They see it, say, Yekoko. See, I'm not thinking about Ghana. Most of the people who will vote, the core people, because of Ghana. But if NDC is in power, if NPP is low, we continue our gravy train. So, therefore, it's not easy. But I think that a third force has emerged. My desire is that they will capture about, say, 40 seats. Then, in Parliament. Then, even if they don't, they would then be, you see, one person who comes from just 5 miles from his constituency, 5 miles from my constituency, one person is making a wave of difference in our hung Parliament. I think that to expect...
You mean the independent candidate from Fomena?
Yes. My village is only 5 miles from Fomena.
Andrew Esiama?
Yes. You like mentioning names too much. That's why. Anyway, on a more serious note, basically, I think we must challenge the status quo. And a third force will be very good for Ghana. But the likelihood that a third force can win election come December is a very formidable one.
But they could in the coming election if they work towards it, as in not December 2024.
Yes. But my wish is that they will have sufficient seats to really force certain actions.
So for you, the focus, which Abu Sakara himself has said,
okay, I haven't heard that.
And I think Alan as well, is to get some seats in Parliament first, and then they can work towards the presidential. That's what you're saying.
Yes. Yes, because it will be too ambitious to think that they can win the presidency. But all things are possible. If something happens and Ghanaians get so mad, but that likelihood is very, very, very slim.
Prof, your final word, and if you could chip in just a little bit about the power sector, if you would.
It's quite unfortunate. I don't think, let's be very careful. It is not as bad as the Doomsday days. But if we don't, it can only get worse. So the first thing is that to look at if there are bottlenecks which are not allowing us to use the existing capacity to the fullest, must be addressed. But in the long run, we must have a national strategic agenda. For example, I just checked, I didn't know that you were going to ask this question, but just this week I checked what proportion of power is used by household, and it's 47%. We can easily reduce that one by 20%, which will immediately ease power for industry.
We turn our lights off when we are not using them.
Oh, but that one, we won't. It's very difficult to police it. We can go solar. I think that immediately the government should allow all solar panels and anything to do with it import free. Because in the end, the country and the government will win. In my house, for the past 3 days, I have not switched on even 5 minutes of ECG. I'm totally on solar for 10 meg. You see, unfortunately, I did it just before the crisis of 2022. So it all cost me some few tens of thousands, while today I asked for it, it's going to about 100,000. So we must have a strategy to make sure that we have a long-term solution, and the efficiency of UCG has to improve. And I think that I read in the paper there's something in the often privatization of collection. I can tell you,
that's what the Otumfuo is asking for, that we should privatize VRA and ECG. You agree with that?
I think that there's some wisdom, of course, my nana, and that's because Otumfuo has said it. There's some wisdom. I live in an undeveloped area, and I know that there are some electricity elsewhere where there will be no meters. It cannot happen if there's a private sector responsible and their income is based on collection. It will be done. So, but how to balance private-public involvement is far trickier in this sector, and I wouldn't say that I have the expertise to be able to say the best way to combine them, but there is a need for private sector involvement.
Thank you so much, Prof, for your time.
You're most welcome.